A cynic, said Oscar Wilde, knows the price of everything and the value of nothing. So when it comes to luxury, where do the most discerning clients of all see real value? And how do collectors, consumers, brands and artisans create it? To discuss that question, I'm joined by an expert panel, as Alex says. Starting furthest away from me, we have Nick Foulkes, esteemed author, journalist and long-standing Spears contributor. Next in, we have Aino Grapin, who's the CEO of Winch Design. And then closest to me is Jules Maury, head of Scott Dunn Private, which is the invite-only membership division exclusively for Scott Dunn's private clients. So I'm going to start with the Oxford Dictionary definition of luxury: a state of great comfort or elegance, especially when involving great expense. But the word luxury and the way it's bandied about, I think, sometimes makes some of us feel a bit queasy. It's a bit lazily used. Can we do a bit better than that? Can we talk about what we really mean? What do we mean when we say luxury? Is it a feeling? Is it something else? Can we get a sense of it? Nick, can I throw that at you?
Yes, you may. I was looking for the expert panel, and then I realized it was us, which is terrifying, really. First of all, to judge from the previous session, luxury is not Canary Wharf, I could figure out. You put a lipstick on a pig, and it'll still look a fuck of a lot better than Canary Wharf, is what my takeaway was from that. And I actually remember going to Canary Wharf when it wasn't Canary Wharf, when it was just a sort of, I flew in a helicopter through where the top of that tower would be. And that was a very long time ago. But even longer ago was a man called Mr. Voltaire, Frenchman, I think he was, lived on the shore of Lake Le Mans. And he had one or two clever things to say, among which was the superfluous, a very necessary thing. So that, happily, I think all of us in this room have our immediate physical needs met. We are all wearing fancy clothes that preserve us from the climate. We all live, hopefully not in Canary Wharf. So luxury is the tinsel that makes life. It sort of distracts us on that sort of journey from cradle to grave. We need to be distracted. We need to be entertained, and we need to be culturally enriched, I think, as well. So Voltaire put it far better than I ever could.
I know, you might be able to put it better than Voltaire. You're French.
Well, I certainly can't put it better than Nick. I would say I agree with that, and also I would go down the path of enlightenment, which is quite ambitious, but I think luxury is a sort of elevated state, and I think when we talk about luxury, it's not just products and things, but services, of course, and the more I think of it, the more I think it's the disappearance of all material worry, and if you can anticipate their every need and they never need to worry about anything, then in a way they are in that state of luxury.
Lovely. Jules?
The sad thing about this is it's going to sound terribly repetitive, but I do agree with you, because I think luxury today has changed fundamentally in that people aren't looking so much at what they can buy and the material things that they've actually always aspired to, but what they want is experiences, they want adventures, they actually want to invest their money in memories and things that actually carry a little bit more weight. But in order to actually execute those, you've got to have incredible service. You've got to be able to deliver on everything that you're basically promising them. And that's true luxury to these people. It's something that is intangible. It's something they can't necessarily buy, but they still aspire to. And certainly with us, that happens to be extraordinary, curated holidays.
Absolutely. And this feeling, a huge amount of time and effort is exercised by companies, brands, and they're dealing with the most exacting customers, the most valuable customers, and they're trying to give them this feeling, they're trying to let them capture these things that you've talked about. Why is that so important to brands and companies of all different kinds? Nick, why is it strategically important?
What I've noticed is that you're being sold something. Notionally, you're being sold a barrel of whiskey or a jewel or a wristwatch or a car. But what that is, it's the sort of visible part of the invisible thing, which is the experience that you are then offered to go with it. So I use a very clumsy analogy, and I'm sure none of you go to supermarkets at all, ever. But if one were to go to a supermarket, you might see things called ready meals. Again, I'm sure you're not familiar with them. But they have a picture on the front, which is called a serving suggestion. And I think that in luxury, the object, I think, is still crucial because it's a focus of craftsmanship, skill, it's an accumulation of culture, it's got a sort of cultural payload to it. If it's a good, I mean, I'm talking beyond the kind of merely meretricious crap that we might have sort of considered as luxurious once. But that is then added to by this experience. So you get the money can't buy experience, except of course it can buy it because you just have bought it. But it could be, I know Panerai, for example, offer the chance to go and traipse around the North Pole with Mike Horn. You've got, I mean, it's in the middle now of the high jewelry selling season, and you've got, it's not a question of just going to look at a nice piece of jewelry and evaluating on its merits. You are invited to take a cultural journey and a physical journey as well to, as Aino was saying, to kind of enrich your cultural understanding of life, add to your reservoir of experience. Now, that's not to say that that can't be competitive as well, and this thing of making memories is all very well, but I mean, I think that it is being manipulated commercially, and I don't think that's not a bad thing or a good thing, it's just a thing, you know, but we look for more than just the object.
Absolutely. And this practice and creating this feeling and these products, it cuts across all kinds of parts of our life. The products, the services, the brands, experiences, client entertaining. And one of the crucial elements of creating this thing that we're talking about is often personalization. Aino, can you talk about why that's important? We'll ask you about how you do it a little bit later, but can you talk about why something being personalized is important?
Well, I think the ultimate aim of those brands, when Nick was describing the process, is to create loyalty, right? Because you don't want those clients to go elsewhere. And I certainly think that creating that luxury experience is essential to creating the loyalty around those most valuable clients and justifying, you know, probably everyone in this room is offering a service or a product for a slightly higher fee or a much higher fee. So you have to justify that somehow. For us, so Winch Design is a design studio. We design here in London, but projects all around the world, homes on land, sea, and air, so that's yachts, private planes, and extraordinary residential projects or luxury hotels for private clients. And so everything is personalized, nothing is standard, from all of the furniture, the decorative items, the photo frames, the yacht, the lifestyle. So why is it important? Quite simply because every single individual wants to be recognized and understood as a unique individual, and we're all unique, but our clients are perhaps even a little bit more unique than others, and they want their uniqueness recognized. I think they really enjoy the process of it, so we tend to think that they might enjoy the process of building the yacht almost as much as they're actually going to enjoy sailing. And they love to be part of it, part of every decision with us. So with their family, sometimes it's a multi-family member kind of decision. You need to keep everybody happy. So it has to be personalized, but to several people as well. So it's really the core of what we do, and our process is solely about custom.
Sure. And without giving any details away that your clients wouldn't like you to, can you talk about an example of how you've done this? Are there particular cases that stand out as illustrating this concept particularly well?
That's a really hard one because we literally do it for everything we do. But I was thinking actually of a yacht where so on the back of a yacht, you typically have a beach club. So that's the platform from which you're going to dive into the sea and take out your toys and play, etc. So it's quite a nice area to enjoy, and so we really tailor it to the owner's lifestyle. And we invented a feature that's now on many yachts, which are descending steps that sort of, instead of having to go down a ladder or up a ladder, you have these steps that sort of descend into the sea so that you can just step into the water. And I don't know if you can guess who we invented this customization for, this little lifestyle feature. It was actually for the owner's dog. So a sort of short-ish thing that couldn't jump into the water and obviously couldn't be pulled out, so had to have its little steps. And so we're really down to that level of customization to the owners who love their dogs. And the list just goes on. But I think beyond that, then we think about, obviously, the product that we offer is design. So it's custom design, so we train our designers to think about the client, think in the client's shoes, have empathy, understand their lifestyle, even though your own lifestyle is very different to their lifestyle, but just imagine that you are them. But also in the service that we're offering, you know, we put a lot of effort into meaningful content. So they're going to have to wait 3 to 4 to 5 years for their project to be delivered. And in the meantime, can we offer them videos about the artisans who are crafting the gilded table, who are embroidering their window treatments while they're waiting for it, and they really enjoy that kind of meaningful, personalized content. And so instead of perhaps just doing a book, a beautiful coffee table book about your own brand, you might think about getting Nick to write a book about their collection or their own project.
I'm alive and in need of work, by the way, so if anybody's got a yacht in build out in the room, and I can see many potential people who have, I'm come up and talk to me later. I'll give you a discount.
So, thank you. And after that brief interlude, Jules, personalization is your bread and butter, I think, in many ways at Scott Dunn Private. Can you talk about your perspective on that topic?
Well, it starts really in the beginning, because it's all about, and I think when we were having our first panels this morning, we were talking to the wealth managers, it's all about knowing who your customer is. It's all about our members and how we engage with them. And what's totally critical is actually being able to share our passion and what we feel they would like with them, but using their language. You really have to understand them, and until you understand them, you haven't got any way of personalizing the most amazing curated trip. You've got to understand their children, what they love. Are they someone who's really interested in culture, or do they want to go on an incredible adventure? And you, above everything, with all of the knowledge that we have, which is probably our greatest gift to them, our inspiration, our operational in the detail, everything is in the know. If you don't get it right with who they are, then you're not actually going to create anything that has a lasting effect and memory and retain them. And everything is personalized after that to what they want.
And how do you get to know them? How do you learn all these things?
It's something that we always, we interview our guests from the very beginning. And we stress the importance that if they're going to become a member of Scott Dunn Private, which is rather like somebody going to a wealth manager who they're going to entrust all their money to invest, they have to be investing in us, because they not only trust us for what we can give them, but there has to be a synergy. There has to be a relationship. We have to be tuned in to who they are. And that takes time, and we make sure that we take that time to actually get to know them, so that we can piece together those things that are so special to them, like, you know, they love their dogs, so you would never even raise an eyebrow if they wanted to basically take that dog with them to somewhere.
And so is that as simple as, oh, let's go for lunch, or because these are busy people?
I know, and pinning them down is incredible. We'll fly to meet them. We will offer to go and see them in their offices. If they've got time for a lunch, which is extremely unlikely, or a dinner, or we hold very personalized events that in the beginning we invite them to, so they can get a feel of what we do. But predominantly, it's about finding any way to meet them face to face. This is not something that you do over an email. This is really having, at best, a Zoom call.
Sure. And when we spoke earlier, Nick, we were speaking about this kind of event when people come together to learn things, to build relationships, to create these experiences. But we identified a tension for the ultra-high net worth individuals, between having something exclusive, being in an exclusive environment, but also being lonely and being separate. Can you talk a little bit about that difficulty that that the ultra high net worth individual might face.
The E.L. Doctorow moment?
I think it might be.
E.L. Doctorow wrote this very good novel in the 70s called Ragtime. It's about Gilded Age America. And it's a sort of factual novel. So you see Henry Ford, you see Pierpont Morgan. And it's quite instructive because it sort of, where you're introduced to Morgan, he's got this pineapple nose, and he says that every time he takes on another company, there's another sort of carbuncle on his nose. But it says in there, it says, for years he had surrounded himself with parties of friends and acquaintances, always screening them in his mind for the personal characteristics that might indicate less regard for him than they admitted. He was invariably disappointed. Everywhere men deferred to him and women shamed themselves. He knew, as no one else could, the cold and barren reaches of unlimited success. When you're that far ahead of things, life probably is quite lonely. I mean, I'm perfectly sort of happy chundering along in the kind of lower 5%, but when you reach that level of success and there's nobody else to gauge yourself by because you're so far ahead, things get quite lonely. And I think that there's a point about exclusivity, but there's also a point about shared community. And I think that is, it's not something that you can actually calibrate. I think, you know, as you were saying, it's a question of meeting them, and it's not an email, it's not a telephone call. It's actually, it's not so much like a financial advisor. It's almost as much like a doctor or a psychological insight that you judge because it's an intuitive gift that you understand how much. They say, "Oh, I'm a terribly private person." Well, you know, most people say they're terribly private people, unless they're actually honest, in which case they'll say, I'm kind of private some of the time, but there are other times when I like to kind of live it up, or there are other times when, because human beings are social animals. Look, we're all here, for God's sake. So I think that there is a balance between, and the trick about luxury is understanding that balance. It's about exposing them to, I remember I spoke to somebody, it was when Prince Geoffrey was buying like there was no tomorrow, and he just bought himself a couple of houses in the Place Vendôme, which obviously even then didn't come cheap. And he said the biggest excitement for him was there was a sort of New Year's Eve evening, and he went out and he was jostled in the street. And this for him was the height of excitement, that he'd actually been out of his enchanted realm to be jostled in the street by French people. And then he went back inside to resume his life of great luxury and privilege. So it's not as simple as saying, oh, it's going to be the most exclusive thing, and we're going to get you the best of this and the best of that, and you'll have it all to yourself. Because that's actually quite arid, or as D.L. Doctorow put it much better than I did, cold and barren. So I think that humanity is important in that. Not too much, of course, but just enough to make it, to season the dish.
Fantastic. And, I mean, speaking again about these events, finding this balance, you said when we had our call earlier that you have a rule about going to events that if there's a group sort of situation, you might not be so interested as if there was something bespoke and tailored specifically to you, or if you were supposed to be meeting someone, you wouldn't necessarily meet someone in a group. You think that there's a way that people who are creating these experiences have to value the time of the people who come.
Yeah, I mean, my time is as valuable to me as the chief executive of, I don't know, Megacorp is to them. So just being kind of commoditized and bound in a group. I mean, first of all, thanks to the miracle of social media and the internet, I can now know what's happening on a kind of, on a sort of factual basis within seconds, because it'll be on some young agile person who's in the group will have already put it on the internet. So I'm looking for greater insights. What you were saying, it's you're looking for. And insight, I think, can only be imparted. And I want it also to be a special experience, because I'm a terrible snob, like most of these sort of consumers of luxury are, that I like to think that for however long, the attention is focused upon me, and I am benefiting from that experience. Or it has to be something, as you said, it's not going to watch a game of cricket for me. And if somebody knows what I like, it's probably not going to be saying we're going to go and watch a football match and then go for a curry and a punch-up afterwards. I mean, that's not really my idea of a good night out.
Well, each to their own. But there are exceptions that people make, and that's when they can be brought together in in my opinion, it's often when they can be brought together around a shared passion, for example. And there are certain people that can do this. I know, have you thought about that?
Yes, I believe that, as Nick was saying, we are social animals, and even in this loneliness that John Pierpont, J.P. Morgan was feeling, some very ultra high net worth individuals or billionaires might feel that they do want to meet people who are experiencing the same thing that they are. So they might not want to join the group and go to football, etc., but they could be very interested in meeting people who are in different fields than their own. They might not encounter them, but they need that network. And I've heard that some PR firms will organize those dinners for them to meet, another billionaire, etc. I also think that then I was talking to a friend who works at Ralph Lauren, and she was explaining that if you are a top client at Ralph Lauren, you will be invited to the Wimbledon final, exquisite lunch, etc. Quite an extraordinary experience, and you obviously need to have spent a lot of money there in the past year. But their uber top clients won't go to that. And instead, what they get is this completely personalized experience again. They get the keys to the Ralph Lauren Palazzo in Milan, and Ralph Lauren will organize a party for them with their own guests. So it's not any old group, it's their group, which I think is incredibly intelligent of the luxury brand that's doing that, because then you acquire all these other customers who are their friends.
And it is also, again, based around the experience. It plays to the point of these brands becoming increasingly upmarket travel operators, in that they are offering a travel experience. Because I like tennis, and it's nice to go to Wimbledon. It's actually quite an intimate experience as sporting events go. But having somebody say, yeah, please use my palazzo, here are the keys, and we'll send the plane to pick you up, I mean, they're the most beautiful words in the English language. The tail number is.
Yes, and that's actually why because all of our projects are very private, and that's why Winch, we designed the penthouse on the top of the old war offices, the OWO, and that was in part so that we could invite our clients, our potential clients, to experience a Winch interior if they haven't done it yet, but in very small groups, one-on-one, or if they want to invite a few guests, again, we can have a small cocktail party or breakfast or something in an exclusive location that otherwise wouldn't be available to them.
And as Nick says, Jules, a lot of brands are turning into travel operators sort of by default, or using the same sort of expertise, or trying to. Once you've learned about your clients, as we discussed previously, what sorts of things do you then do for them? Can you give us a sense of the sort of most extraordinary type of experiences that you've created?
Again, it's quite difficult, because they're all done very specially, and they're very personal, and they're obviously very private. But I will absolutely agree with Nick. I don't say we always send a jet, but we have found that we partner a lot with our brand partners. And between them, I was looking with interest at the Mille Miglia this year, and I had one of my members who was actually in the middle of it when we were talking. And Chopard had actually sponsored quite a few of the people there. And we were looking at perhaps, if you were invited along to come and do something like that and bring 4 of your friends, you'd probably be quite excited if you were a petrolhead. And there are that's what we look at events, for something that really is tailored to what those people want. But I think on the experience side, it has to resonate. To really work, there's got to be something emotionally tangible about it. And I remember years ago, or not so many years ago, but we had a multi-generational family. Got to remember that post-COVID, that's probably one of the biggest rises we've seen in people who actually want to spend their money with their families. And they went to Sri Lanka. We took over a very, very small exclusive resort entirely. We had everything they wanted for the whole family. So there were the masseuses, there was a private safari up to the Yala leopards. We had helicopters going up to the tea plantations. It was sort of everything that was exciting that money could buy to keep everyone in the family happy. And we knew they all wanted these things. But there was one thing and I may cry too, because I always do when I tell this story, was the grandfather came every year to their Christmas, and he always played all the Christmas songs on the piano. Don't ask me how, it took a lot. There are 2 grand pianos in Sri Lanka. We had one of them delivered, and grandfather on Christmas Day could sing along with the whole family. And he died quite recently, and they couldn't stop talking about it. They couldn't stop talking about the video we'd made of it for them and the little book we'd put together. But it was that tiny detail that turned something very luxurious on paper into something intangible, but really, really special for them.
Fantastic. And to reveal some of my motivations for creating this session, part of it is that it's my belief that anyone who deals with a UHMW client base is themselves a luxury brand, whether they realize it or not, whether you're a professional services company or whether you sell jewelry. You deal with people who have exacting standards and require the very best. And so, with that in mind, I thought we'd use the intelligence we have assembled here to ask a question that might help some of the people in the audience in their own lives and businesses. If you were running an event for, say, a private bank or even an accountancy firm or property firm, and your goal was to build a connection with as many ultra-high net worth clients as possible, what would you center it around? If you had to pick one thing, an activity, sport, type of art, or whatever it might be, is there something you think is particularly effective or that you would use for a given reason or that's trendy right now? Jules, can I come to you first?
I think what we try and do on the basis of what Nick said earlier, that not everybody is interested in the same things, is probably try and take something like art or music that we could build or tweak so we could have that extraordinary moment. We were asked to do this, by the way, so I know how much it costs. Bocelli come to the private palazzo, but we'd build in the dinner. We'd probably try and build in something to do with the art all around the culture of Venice as well, so we could hook in a few more people without making it too detailed that someone said, I'm really not interested in coming along to Glyndebourne. So we try and sort of mesh it out, if that makes sense.
And how much is Bocelli?
He was $380,000 at the time for 20 minutes. I thought that was quite cheap when I think how much Beyoncé charged.
Very reasonable. I know.
Yes, I would say don't do it. You're almost sure to fail unless you have really thought about who these people you're targeting are and what they enjoy, because they are likely to have vastly different interests, and you're just wasting, I think, a lot of money on these really expensive events if it's not what they like. And also they might, you gave this example, I mentioned the cricket. Thankfully, I was invited to cricket, and thankfully the person who invited me very generously gave me a get-out-of-jail card saying, if you have no interest in cricket, please let me know. And I said, it is literally the thing I have the least interest in of all. And I'm usually curious about even things I don't know about, but that I don't have any interest in ever knowing anything about it. So thank you. If you want to invite me to Glyndebourne, anytime. So I do think you get this sense of, well, they don't really know who I am at all, unless they say you may not have an interest. So do those extraordinary events, but just make sure that they actually do have an interest. And I think you need to ask those questions. You need to understand what their routine is. Do they go to the Chelsea Flower Show? Do they like horses? Do they like art? Do they collect? Do they go to the art fairs? So that once you have that information, you can have a whole calendar around them, and you'll know if they're in London in the summer, if they're going to go to Art Basel, when they're in Miami, etc. And you can sort of follow them around and offer events, again, maybe even before they've thought of it. You're anticipating, might you be in London in June? Because you were last year, and I wrote it in my CRM. And then would you like to go to this fantastic event organized by Scott Dunn?
And that's what we do. We literally plan the year around exactly what they like.
Nick, someone managed to lure you to France. Did they recently? Is that?
Not yet. I'm still giving it thought.
Okay.
No, I've been asked to a pretty large event. which normally turn me off, except that they're giving dinner in the Musée d'Orsay on the top floor amongst the Impressionist paintings, which I can go and look at those Impressionist paintings whenever I want, and I can go and have dinner in Paris whenever I want. But to have them both at the same time might just get me out of bed, you know. But I mean, I think again, if you're doing it properly, it's about knowing the person. I mean, I'm just kind of curious, and if I've got the time and in my badly organized life, I'll try and go. But I mean, I just think it is just like knowing who you're dealing with and knowing what it is they want. I mean, it may be that you found them a little Fabergé stick pin for Ascot. If they don't want to go, you just got, oh, I just came across this, and it's a, you know, it's not a, I mean, okay, it's not a super expensive thing that you're buying them, but it's a nice thing. And it would be something that every time they go to Ascot and they stick there, they impale their tie with that, they will think of you. So I think that we mustn't abandon the material item immediately and go straight for the experience and the memory. I think those things can be Pavlovian type cues that will unlock a kind of store of memory and a store of hopefully sort of warm feelings towards the giver of the gift.
Sure. Okay, we just have a few minutes left, so if there are questions in the audience, do start to circulate the microphones, please, team. Oh, go on then, Alec, we'll begin. Go ahead.
A very quick question, and I'll ask Nick, or we'll ask Nick first, but go around the panel. Look, ties. When I sat down with the leaders of various wealth management firms, they said, do you want us to wear a tie or not? And I said, well, let's wear ties. But are ties dead? Are they luxurious? Or are they just history?
All of those answers are right. I mean, the tie is, I mean, I mean, at the risk of sort of national stereotyping, my kind of typical Chinese billionaire is probably going to be half my age, about a fucking trillion, gazillion, billion times richer, and wearing a black T-shirt and a pair of slides. So this is, you know, I mean, I dress like the guy who probably serves them drinks, or, I mean, the tie and the suit is the badge of the kind of person who opens your car door for you, who carries your bags, the chap who waits nervously with the pre-scheduled, pre-book-in, pre-check-in stuff at the hotel. So I don't mind that. I mean, it's kind of a way of going undercover for me. I mean, I could pass for the guy doing the check-in any time. I mean, in fact, on the way down here, 3 people asked me if I could sort of direct them to the lavatory, check them in, and take their bags to the door. So it allows me to move sort of unencumbered, whereas if I were wearing a black T-shirt and my slides, which I always do wear normally, I would be mistaken for a very rich man from the other side of the world and be pestered. Not an answer at all, is it?
No, I was just going to say, no, it wasn't at all, but it was very entertaining. If there are no more questions from the audience, I'm just going to finish with one question of my own. What is the next big force that's going to shape what we can call the luxury industry? I think we've seen various things happen in recent times, and the need for sustainability in supply chains and practices and all kinds of things has dramatically changed the industry. That will continue, I would bet, for a little while yet, but are there things that are going to change it yet again? What forces are we going to see that this space is going to be grappling with? AI, VR, other acronyms or abbreviations?
Knowledge, it's knowledge. It's about, it's knowledge. I mean, I deal with people. I was looking at a man's cigar collection the other day, and it was like the warehouse for a big country with this stock inside it. And he was one of these chaps that I described earlier. You would, you know, in that sort of wardrobe. And I said to him, gosh, that's a lot of cigars. And he said, yes, it is. And I said, how long have you been smoking cigars? And I said, I had my first one 4 years ago. This man has, you know, he has spent 4 years, and he is now the owner of one of the best cigar collections in the world, and also so knowledgeable that it shames me, and I'm supposed to know a bit about cigars, and I find myself sort of struggling to keep up. So I think this privileged level of knowledge, and I mean this is why, again, to use a national stereotype, China is going to take over the world, because there's a quick study, and then there was this guy who is like the ultimate cigar expert, and and that's 4 years. I mean, this would normally be a lifetime's application and work, and and then you have all the experiences. You go to the growing, you go to the growers, you go to, but so you're basically looking at people who are so sophisticated and so advanced in their knowledge and their thinking that, I mean, all the stuff about sustainability and not using child labor and having adequate ventilation, that's kind of plumbing. Do you know what I mean? But you're expected to do that
Sure.
now. I think it is about, it's knowledge, really.
Jules, would you add to that?
No,
You agree?
I think it's the critical number one. They want your knowledge. They want to know what's hot, what's trending. They want to know about the hotel that hasn't been built. They want to know about the private island that is literally being designed. And that's probably the most difficult. And I know everyone thinks it's a frightfully glamorous job, but you spend an awful lot of time reading a lot, speaking to a lot of journalists, speaking to all the people you know who might get you the access, begging people to get you into places that you shouldn't really be got into. And above all, Nick, you're so right. You can never be behind the times. You've always got to have the knowledge of anything from anywhere in the world. It's every continent. It's all the wildlife. It's all the indigenous people. It's all the cultural. It's so much to do with the world. And that knowledge is what ultimately keeps your guests totally loyal to you.
Yeah, and it's keeping them entertained, because we are in, I mean, I'm not in, but we are essentially in the entertainment business to a degree, I mean, as well as the travel business, but I mean, it's how can I spend my time? I mean, I want to get a staircase for my dog, see if they can do that. And yes, of course, Aino can.
Yes. And I think it's interesting, therefore, to employ people who have quirky interests, who aren't necessarily just, say, if they're a designer, they've trained as a designer, but I had this recent example where a friend told me they'd gone to Louis Vuitton to buy something, and the salesperson actually had an art history degree. So they didn't have the typical profile of a salesperson in a luxury store, and actually took them through the art gallery that's in the store, and it made for a very interesting experience for them, and it was unexpected. And I think, again, that goes to your point about knowledge, but it might be also someone who's a professional, who used to be a professional athlete or whatever it is.
And I mean, I think that I was at another conference recently where people were saying that sort of China hasn't bounced back as quickly as it could and all the rest of it. And there was actually, on the panel that I was moderating, there was a chap amazing guy, he's 26, he's one of the leading watch dealers in Asia. And he said, hang on a second, I was there this morning and it was doing pretty well. There's not a complacency that we have in the old world in Europe, and London is London, or whatever we learned again in the Canary Wharf session. But I think that also something which I'm not at all good at is cultivating a bit of humility, really, as well, and listening as well as selling.
On which note, we'll have to wrap it up there and show some humility to our next speaker. But for now, thank you very much indeed, Nick Foulkes, Aino Grapin, Jules Maury. It's been a pleasure having you here today. Thank you very much.